The trading deck of Station Kelvore 9 hummed with the usual cacophony of 100 species, bartering, arguing, and conducting business beneath the artificial glow of bioluminescent panels. Rena Hale stood at her usual spot near the eastern airlock, her modest stall displaying earth-grown herbs and spices that commanded premium prices this far from Seoul. She was unremarkable by human standards. Average height, brown hair, tied back practically, wearing the standard-issue jumpsuit of independent traders. But here, among the galaxy's varied life forms, she was a curiosity. Humans always were. Vory perched on the counter beside her, his small frame coiled with the restless energy typical of Kithara cubs, his fur rippled through shades of blue and silver, ears twitching at every sound, tail wrapped protectively around a container of Rena's dried rosemary. The young Kithara rarely left her side, had barely done so since she'd found him half-starved in a ventilation shaft 3 cycles ago. Vory, that's the 3rd time you've reorganized those packets, Rena said, without looking up from her datapad, a smile tugging at her lips. They're not going to arrange themselves any better. The cub chittered, his species equivalent of a sheepish laugh, but his claws remained curled around the container. That's when Dravik approached. The ergoth was massive even by his species standards, easily 3 meters tall, with 4 arms that ended in crushing appendages capable of denting hull plating. His carapace bore the scars of someone who'd survived the fighting pits, and his reputation on Kelvore 9 preceded him a bully who took what he wanted and intimidated anyone too weak to stop him. Human. Dravik's voice rumbled like grinding stone. Several nearby traders suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. I require your stock. All of it. Consider it. Taxation for operating in my section. Rena looked up slowly, her expression unchanged. This isn't your section, Dravik. Station authority. Station authority looks away when I tell them to. One of his lower arms swept across her display, scattering packets. Vory hissed, but Rena placed a gentle hand on his head. I'm not interested in trouble, Rena said, her voice level, already beginning to gather her scattered merchandise. But I'm also not giving you my inventory. I suggest you move along. Dravik's mandibles clicked in amusement. Typical human, all weakness masquerading as peace. He leaned closer, his breath hot and metallic. Your species talks of diplomacy because you're too fragile for anything else. Weaklings. Barely worth the genetic material you're printed from. The trading deck had gone quiet. Even the atmospheric processors seemed to hold their breath. Rena simply straightened, meeting the ergoth's eyes with that peculiar human calmness that so many species mistook for submission. If that's what you think, she said softly, then there's nothing I can say to change your mind. Now please, leave my stall. She turned her back on him, actually turned her back on a creature that could tear her apart, and knelt to retrieve a fallen container. Dravik's mandibles spread wide, preparing to assert his dominance more forcefully. One massive arm reaching for the human's shoulder. He never made contact. Vory moved like liquid lightning. The cub launched from the counter with a shriek that cut through the station's ambient noise like a blade. His small body became a blur of claws and fury, landing on Dravik's outstretched arm and racing up toward his face. The ergoth recoiled, more from surprise than pain. The cub weighed barely 5 kilos, but Vory wasn't finished. You don't touch her. The translator rendered Vory's high-pitched snarls into something approximating galactic common. You don't talk to her like that. Dravik swatted at the cub, but Vory was already moving. Leaping to the ergoth's shoulder, tiny claws finding purchase in the gaps of his carapace. For something so small, the Kithara cub fought with the ferocity of a creature 10 times his size. Vory. Rena's voice cut through the chaos. Firm, but not harsh. Vory. That's enough. The cub froze mid-strike, claws extended, fur standing on end and cycling through aggressive reds and oranges. He looked back at Rena, torn between obedience and rage. Come here, she said, holding out her hand. Vory chittered frantically, gesturing at Dravik with his tail. But he called you. I know what he called me. Come here, please. The cub's ears flattened, but he leaped down, landing in Rena's palm. She lifted him to eye level, and the trading deck watched a human calmly hold a trembling ball of fury. She needs me to protect her, Vory insisted, his words tumbling out. Humans are, everyone says, humans are. Gentle? Rena supplied quietly. Yes. And weak. But you're not weak. Vory's voice cracked. You're gentle. You're my gentle. Only I get to say that, only me, because I know what it means. Something shifted in Rena's expression, a softness that made her seem even more vulnerable, which made what happened next all the more devastating. She looked up at Dravik, who had backed away several steps, uncertain for perhaps the first time in cycles. Around them, the trading deck had attracted a crowd. Dozens of species, dozens of perspectives on what strength meant. You called me weak, Rena said to the Urgoth, her voice carrying in the silence. Fragile. And you're right, I am. By almost every physical metric, humans are outmatched by most spacefaring species. She stroked Vory's head with one finger, calming his trembling. But we've been to war with 3 different species and emerged victorious each time. Do you know why? Dravik said nothing. Because we don't survive in spite of being fragile. We survive because of it. We learn to build tools, form bonds, think strategically, all because we had no other choice. And somewhere along the way, we discovered that choosing gentleness, when you're capable of violence, she smiled. And there was something ancient in it. Something that made several species in the crowd instinctively step back. That's not weakness. That's the luxury of the truly dangerous. She set Vory on her shoulder, where he immediately wrapped his tail around her neck, still glaring at Dravik with ears flat. This cub, Rena continued, understands something you don't. He knows I choose to be gentle with him, choose to feed him, shelter him, let him reorganize my merchandise a dozen times a day. He knows that gentleness is a gift, not a default state. Her eyes hardened. And he knows anyone who mistakes that gift for weakness isn't worth the air they breathe. The silence stretched. Finally, surprisingly, it was an elderly Krillian trader who spoke up, her crystalline voice chiming. The human speaks truth. I have seen her negotiate down armed raiders with nothing but words and patience. Seen her calm a station-wide panic during the breach in Sector 7. The Krillian's facets glittered. If she is weak, then we are all corpses walking. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. A Threnoid merchant nodded their agreement. Even a visiting Zesh military officer inclined their head in what might have been respect. Dravik looked around, sensing the shift, understanding that he'd miscalculated badly. On Kelvore 9, reputation was everything. And his was currently being dismantled by a human who barely came up to his mid-torso, and a cub small enough to fit in a cargo pocket. I apologize for the misunderstanding, Dravik managed, his mandibles clicking rapidly in what his species used to signal retreat. Accepted, Rena said simply. Now please leave. I have inventory to reorganize. The Urgoth left quickly, his heavy footsteps echoing in the resumed bustle of the trading deck. Business resumed, though many traders cast curious glances at the human and her small protector. Vory finally relaxed, his fur cycling back to content blues and silvers. Did I do good? He asked quietly. You did good, Rena confirmed, retrieving her scattered merchandise. Though next time, maybe let me handle things a bit longer, before you launch yourself at someone 10 times your size. But only I get to call you gentle. Vory insisted, nuzzling her cheek. Because I know it's special. I know you choose it. For me. Rena's smile was genuine now, warm. Yes, Vory. Only you. As the station's cycle continued, and the trading deck hummed back to normalcy, a human and a cub went about their simple business of selling earth herbs to curious aliens, unremarkable, gentle, and absolutely not to be underestimated.